we really get into it, I'd just love to hear, what that means, what this year has meant for you with the new album, with all the touring and such.
I mean, this year has meant so much to me because it's the first time that I put out a full album. So I do kind of feel like a rookie,
Yeah.
like my first album. And it's the first time that I put out music that I feel really proud of, that I can like stand behind and be like, this is actually who I am as an artist. So I think it's appropriate, and it's just been a year of like a lot of firsts, I think. First time doing my own tour, first album, first like all these different things, first time in all these places. So it's been a really exciting year.
So since you did play a lot of these shows, I'm just wondering, if there's maybe a particular memory, perhaps when you were overseas or playing one of the Liz Phair shows, that you really can select and treasure from this year. Obviously, there's probably been a lot of great memories, but yeah, what's one tour memory that really rings out to you?
The first show that we played on this tour, I was sort of like getting there, being like just trying to find my footing. And it's kind of different than playing my own shows, opening for somebody, and I'm just like trying to do the thing. And
Yeah.
I was like, somebody told me that Liz wanted to say hi, and I was like, okay, that's cool. And then when I got off stage after the first show, she was like waiting there side stage to say hi, and she like gave me the world's biggest hug and was like, I'm so happy you're here. And it just was a really kind of moving thing for me because it was the first night of her tour, and she took the time, instead of like warming up and doing whatever during those however long, like she was watching our set for a while, and she could have been doing a lot of other things, and she took the time to kind of like make me feel comfortable and take me under her wing and welcome me to the tour. And it was kind of moving because I just don't think that that's something that happens all the time. And I sort of felt like, okay, it's just like a good example of how you treat people on tour and how you kind of welcome people and be a role model, I guess. So I
Definitely.
will never forget that.
I've noticed that you've been playing a cover of Tigre's Deceptacon, which I just think is an amazing song. An absolute classic. I would just, love to hear. That's obviously been in the set for a while now. What was your decision to include that song, rather than just being something that you played for fun, but to actually put it in the set?
Well, Kathleen Hanna is the goat.
She's the goat.
So absolute goat. And I just was listening to that album a lot and kept coming back to that song. And I just wanted to play it because I thought it would be so fun to play it.
Yeah.
It wasn't like I need to play this because of any other reason. I just was like, this song is so good and it's so much fun. And I also think that the people who are coming to these shows typically know that song, which is
Hmm.
nice, because if you're an opener, they most likely don't know who you are, and it can
Yeah.
be a lot for people to sit through like 45 minutes of songs they don't know. So I think it's kind of nice to add a song that people do know. But mostly it's just like that song is awesome and really fun to play live.
I do want to ask about that song, Veronica Mars. That's, I think, my favorite song on the album. And I keep going back to Logan's a Dick. I'm learning that's hot. That makes me think
Hmm.
just a lot about, we're kind of around the same age, and just makes me think about a lot of the shit that we saw when we were kids that obviously doesn't hold up now, but like those kind of messages are so important when you're forming an identity, forming your adolescence. Have you thought about any other kind of things that maybe we saw when we were growing up that like you look back and you're like, I can't believe that's a message that we sent to young people?
Yeah, so many. The
Yeah. It's
biggest
kind of a tough
one,
question. I'm sorry.
no, there's so many messages like that because I was born in 97, and I think the 2000s were just like criminal in terms of the messaging in media and the
Hmm.
way that things like tabloids and TV shows and whatever would just like rip women apart. And I think, and also just the way that we talked about being queer and queer identity was so um, fucked up. But I think the thing that I'm thinking about in my everyday life, for the most part, is just the way that we talked about women's bodies and food and like
Yeah.
size, and the way that that was talked about in magazines. And because I was reading that kind of stuff when I was in my formative years, and just the I remember seeing there was always like literal weight was written down in tablets and stuff, like, oh, this person weighs this much, this calories, like all this kind of quantifying of different food things and bodies, and attaching that to people's value. That's something that I think is probably sticks with me the most from the messaging in that era. And I think in that song, I didn't talk about that in particular. I was talking more about like the message that if someone treats you well, they're not hot.
Hmm.
That's sort of the message that I was talking about. But I think it's all kind of the same vibe to me. It's all
Yeah.
this kind of, let's keep women in their place so that they don't get more powerful kind of a thing.
I'd love to ask, you can share however much you'd like just about, yeah, what the next album is looking like for you, some themes that you'd really like to explore.
The next album, I mean, I've started writing, but it's not done at all. So, I think something that I've noticed is that with the last album, I was talking about a lot of bigger themes kind of funneled into dating. And
Hmm.
there was a lot of like, I'm talking about relationships on the surface, but what I'm really talking about is like self worth. And I think on the next album, the stuff that I'm writing now, it's not as much through the lens of dating. It's more like, you know, the real formative relationships that are underneath that. And like, if you're choosing to date people who aren't so nice, like I talked about on the first album, the second album's kind of like, why were you, why am I choosing that? If that makes sense. So I
Definitely.
think,
That makes a
yeah.
lot of sense. Well, whatever materializes, I know we're all going to be very excited to hear it.